The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. This is the United Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Quirky Dog Podcast, inspired by some of the quirkiest dogs you can ever imagine and the owners who love them. This podcast is brought to you by the quirky couple themselves, Scott and Jess Williams. Their aim is to educate and entertain. Here's Scott and Jess.
Here's Jess and a wine bottle. Scotty is home with the flu, unfortunately, so I'm coming to you solo today, you guys. We didn't have a podcast in the can, but I'm here to serve regardless. So happy Wednesday, and thank you for joining us here today. We are going to talk about the 7 deadly sins of dog ownership, but first we're going to start with the quirky tip of the day. I have to play all the parts. It's very tricky. My quirky tip of the day is we are keeping in the theme of giving back over the holidays. And last week we talked about a great organization that helps previous working dogs maintain their health. This week we're talking about working dogs in the field that need vests. Mass Vested Dog. We did an awesome podcast earlier this year. I will link it in the show notes with Dave Shillelagh from Mass Vested Dog. It is an organization that gets bulletproof vests on these dogs who are out in the field day in, day out. You can donate to them. You could save a dog's life. Check them out. Awesome, awesome organization. And if you missed that podcast, it was uber entertaining. He had his Malinois Kona here. She was on the table. It was super fun. He's a great guy, and it's a great organization. Okay, so 7 deadly sins of dog ownership. This one, I did a little homework on my own and did a little soul searching, and I think I came up with a pretty comprehensive list. The first one is going to be choosing a working dog as your first pet, staying in line with our whole working dog theme from Mass Vested Dog. Now, I'm not saying that this is always going to fail. I understand that sometimes people, wanted to get a dog first time in their young adulthood life. They found an awesome German Shepherd. They found an amazing Border Collie. They found a dog that fit into their lifestyle, and that is fine. For the most part, if you are new to pet ownership and you are looking at getting a dog into your family and trying that out and seeing how that goes, I would not recommend getting a working dog. Working dogs are a lot to own, to handle, to train, to keep alive, to care for. It is a whole other echelon of dogs. So as sexy as it looks when you see, a certain dog in a movie, that movie Dog was really popular with Malinois. When you see a dog and you think, oh, this is what would be great for the family, think twice, do yourself a favor, and let me tell you that for me, that is my first deadly sin of dog ownership. Do not get a working dog as your very first dog. I also have the 7 deadly sins wine bottle up here today as a little bit of a helper. I needed something else up here, and I thought it was a good prop. I'm not going to be drinking though, because I'm getting over a little sickness myself. All right, my second deadly sin of a dog owner: victimizing your dog. And I understand that sometimes things happen and we feel bad for our dogs, and rightfully so. Totally get that. Things happen and in our own household, and we're like, oh, I wish he wasn't feeling ill. Oh, I wish that person didn't approach him that way. We're feeling bad for our dog. Victimizing the dog day in, day out, 24/7, either talking about how they had this traumatic past, or how the vet tech approached them wrong, or how, the dog walker didn't spend enough time with them, or XYZ. You're just victimizing your dog. You're creating a shell of a dog, for one. You're not building this canine companion up into what you want. You want to build dogs into, strength and partners and everything else. You don't want to sit there and victimize them. This is not good for you. This is not good for the dog. And we see it time and time and time again. Poor Fluffy, he's so sad. Oh, it's, cold out. Poor Fluffy's feet are cold. Oh, Fluffy, doesn't want to get his nails trimmed. All of this stuff, you just start creating a myriad of reasons why things happen and why your dog is a victim. And it just becomes the dog's role. It just becomes the way you look at the dog, the way the world looks at the dog. And in a certain sense, I believe the way the dog looks at him is herself. So be careful that you're not victimizing your dog. Dogs are warriors. Dogs are tough. Dogs need to be built up, and you need to be giving them confidence, okay? So constantly playing this card of, woe is my dog, and my poor dog, and oh, he's so upset. Not a good look, not good for you, not good for your dog. Be very, very conscious of it. And it's a good rule of thumb for life as well. And I'm going to try to stick to dogs as much as possible here. But, a lot of people like to play the victim card in their own life. This isn't a good look. This isn't a good vibe. This isn't good energy to be bringing into your mind and into your body all the time. So even if you are a victim, even if, you have been done wrong and, there's been wrongdoing against you and everything else, do not allow this to become your identity. And I think so often people like to look at these dogs and think like, oh, they need love, they need support, and they're victimizing them, and really they're just belittling the potential of what that dog could be. So be very conscious of not victimizing your dog. That is the second deadly sin of dog ownership. My third deadly sin, never letting your dog walk. Okay, so this sounds a little crazy. I get it. If you have a giant breed and the giant breed is a puppy, 100% your giant breed should not be doing stairs. I totally understand picking that dog up. If you have a geriatric dog, you need to carry that dog sometimes. Definitely for the dog's best interest. Really, I'm with you on this. Puppies that can get sick, maybe they don't have vaccines yet. Yes, you're not going to let them walk around Petco. Ideally, you're not bringing them to Petco in the first place, but that's another podcast. If you have a dog that is capable of walking, but you just carry it everywhere, and this does happen sometimes, people. I cannot explain this to you, but it is a deadly sin of dog ownership. If you are now carrying the dog from the couch to the bedroom, you're carrying the dog everywhere you go. Maybe you're pushing it in a stroller. This is not how you should own a dog. One, it's terrible for the dog's physicality, okay? Dogs have 4 legs. They're meant to walk. I don't care how big or how small they are. They need to be moving, okay? This is part of what a dog does. They need to be moving their body on the ground. And you are literally holding them back, hindering them from being their best selves by carrying them everywhere. And I understand that it gives a lot of people great comfort to have these dogs. Some people even have these strappy in kind of things like you'd see a baby having. They put their dog in it. I get here and there for a parade or something, you're going to strap something like that on. But in general, dogs should be walking on the ground unless for some reason they're paraplegic, and a lot of those dogs are then pulling wheels. They need to be on the ground. They should not be carried everywhere. It is so, 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 so important. And I think a lot of people listening to this podcast are thinking, well, that's crazy. Of course this happens. Of course my dog walks. A lot of older ladies that get a tiny dog, they love carrying their dog everywhere. A lot of these very posh city chicks, they get a dog, they push it in a stroller, they buy it expensive clothes. The dog is not walking. Dog should be walking on the ground. That is my third deadly sin of dog ownership, never allowing your dog to walk. Really big one, really concerning one. And it's becoming more and more prevalent. And it sounds crazy, but we're breeding these designer breeds and people are just taking on the role of accessorizing them and dressing them up and spending thousands of dollars on them. But walking should be a part of that equation. Okay, we're going to do one more and then we're going to go to break. My fourth deadly sin is always allowing your dog to win. So there are going to be situations where our dogs get away with stuff, and as they get older, it happens more, I wouldn't say more often than not, but it happens more often than it used to. We'll say that. So for instance, at night, Scott and I can be watching TV. Jimmy might be on his bed hanging out watching TV. These days, he likes to come off on his bed and come and jump up and hang out with us. We cast this off as no big deal. We love it. We want to hang out with him anyway. It's totally fine. We don't think twice about it. Our dogs do little wins here, there, and everywhere. Sometimes we like to see a little naughtiness from our old dogs. It shows that they have some character. They're pushing the boundaries. They're pushing the limits. They're not just being these perfect little soldiers anymore. Sometimes they'll test or crate games, and it's just these little power struggles, and sometimes we just let it go. It's not a big deal. If you are the kind of person that always lets your dog win. For instance, the dog doesn't want to go outside. Fine, it doesn't have to go outside. It can potty in the house. The dog doesn't want to be handled at the vet. It either, now gets fully anesthetized to be at the vet, or everybody avoids the dog, or whatever you want to look at. The dog doesn't want to eat its dinner. You start peppering food that's, more enticing. The dog may enjoy more, everything else. If you are always letting your dog win, this is a deadly sin of dog ownership, and this is not going to serve you into the future. Dogs need to know boundaries. They need to have structure. They need to know that someone is able to provide them with the basic needs and care, and that includes some rules. I'm sorry, they cannot always win. It's just like children, and it's worse now, it seems, than ever before than it used to be. But a lot of these kids, you see, they're just always winning. They're always winning. There's a little argument with their parents, they win, and then they're fighting harder and harder at school, at friends' houses, with friends' parents. It's just escalating and spiraling out of control. And this is not what dogs want. It may seem in the short term like you're doing the right thing. You're giving your dog some sort of, love and happiness because you've fulfilled their request. That's not the case. They need to know that there are clear-cut rules, that there are clear-cut boundaries. You need to be able to structure their lives so they know that there's some predictability moving forward. And it's not just going to be, they choose that they don't want to go for the walk. Okay, so they don't have to walk. We cannot allow the dog to win at every turn. And I would say this is something that we see frequently with our clients where, we'll list off 5, 6, 7 things, and the owner's like, yep, no, he doesn't want to do that. We do it this way. No, he doesn't want to do that. We do it this way. And now all of a sudden you have yourself a pretty major behavioral case, and you're going to need to invest pretty heavily in some training because the dog is just used to getting his or her way. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't make our dogs happy. And this isn't even talking about like consent and stuff when it comes to handling and everything else. This isn't the point. The point is when the dog doesn't want something, you totally change the game and you acquiesce the dog and you make it, okay, you don't have to do that. Always allowing the dog to win, no matter what the context is going to get you into big trouble. And it is not going to be best for your dog or your dog's psyche. And it's really going to screw up your lifestyle. So be very conscious of that. Okay, let's go to break super quick. And when we get back, we're going to go over our last 3.
Want to keep up with all the latest from the Quirky Dog podcast like me and Murphy here? Then make sure you head on over to the YouTube channel and subscribe. Or if you prefer to listen to the madness, go on over to iTunes or Spotify and follow the Quirky Dog podcast. And hey, while you're there, leave a rating and review and let them know what you think of the show. Until then, keep it quirky.
Okay, I'm back. My next one, this is going to be number 5. We're doing 7 deadly sins of dog ownership. Number 5 is removing all accountability from your dog. And this is going to seem like maybe a little bit of a repeat, but really what this means is that someone who's always making excuses for their dog. It's not so much about victimizing the dog. It's not so much about letting the dog win all the time. It's about always having a reason of why something happened, and it's never the dog's fault. So for instance, somebody walks past your dog on the street, your dog lunges out. That owner is now automatically blaming the person that walked. You looked at my dog incorrectly. You looked at my dog cross. You caused this. The dog is acting a fool at the vet. There's no other way to describe it. The dog will not let anyone do anything to it. It's just a routine exam. The dog is totally blowing up. The owner is now blaming the vet tech and maybe the breeder and maybe the rescue and the vet. They're not showing the dog that there's some accountability here. They're not holding the dog accountable. Now, in this the way that dogs' brains work and stuff, of course, they're not going to be having this higher level of thinking of, oh, I'm being held accountable right now. But it is a basic way of how you are interacting with your dog and with others and how you're presenting your dog's actions and how you feel about them. You need to hold your dog accountable in certain situations. At the dog park, a dog could, run up, and Scott and I are not real big on dog parks. We are pretty forward about that. I think that everybody that watches pretty regularly knows this. But, if you're at the dog park and, everything's going fine and your dog now walks into the dog park and stirs up some shit, a lot of owners will sit there and they'll start nitpicking other dogs and other owners and your dog started this and your dog did this. If it was all harmonious and then your dog walked into that freaking environment and all hell broke loose, that is going to be on your dog. That is an issue where your dog is not behaving in a way that's appropriate in the dog park, and it's pissing off other dogs. So you need to hold your dogs accountable. And this goes for basic behaviors as well, you guys. It is really important that you hold your dog accountable for sitting before they're released to go out the door if that's something that you ask for. They like to be held accountable. This goes back to they like the predictability, they like the structure, they like to know that someone else is in control. So if you are someone that is constantly, and I'm sure as you're listening to this, you're thinking, oh yeah, it's just like this person, or it's just like this student, or it's just like this. Someone's always making an excuse for their dog. They're always blaming something external from their dog. This is a really good time to do some soul searching and think about holding your dog accountable as we go into the new year. Because just like children, just like people, just like employees, just like politicians, ideally, we need to be holding people accountable. You need to be accountable for your actions. And it's not that the dog knows, oh, I can't be an ass at the dog park, but maybe you don't bring the dog to the dog park anymore. Maybe you teach your dog, better rules and better recall and everything else at the dog park. So you're not going to have these behaviors escalate and spiral and become a big deal. So that is number 6. Always removing all accountability from your dog. It's one of my 7 deadly sins of dog ownership. And, there's a lot of ways that we can screw up as dog owners. This isn't a comprehensive list, but to me, these were the 7 biggest ones that were like screaming and highlights over our years of things that either it was kind of too hard to turn things around with a relationship with a dog and an owner, or things had gotten so behaviorally out of control, and it's either because one or a multitude of these things on the list had come up. All right, my next one is avoiding confinement at all costs. So I know that crates can be controversial. Clearly, Scott and I are very big on crates. We're very big advocates for crates. We think crates are great for dogs. If you are avoiding putting your dog in a room, putting your dog in an X-pen, putting your dog in, maybe an enclosed area outside, if you're avoiding confinement at all costs, this is going to bite you in the butt. And the number one way that this is going to probably happen is if the dog ever has a medical issue where it needs to be confined. You're going to see it present itself right away. It's at the vet, it needs to be in a crate, and it's not used to being confined, so it's protesting. Now, not only are they trying to treat whatever medical condition it has, the dog has so much extra anxiety and angst, and it's behaviorally acting out because it's not used to confinement. If you're anti-crate, that is your own choice, and that is fine. We would highly, highly recommend that you condition your dog to a crate, feed your dog in a crate, get your dog used to a crate for a lot of different reasons. But you should be able to put your dog in a bathroom if you need to, put your dog in a bedroom if you need to, confine your dog to the kitchen if you need to. We start to create these little monsters when we are not allowing confinement in any way, any shape, or any form, and the dog again is winning here by breaking through the gates that you left to keep them in the kitchen, breaking out, and they're starting to hurt themselves. They can definitely have some severe self-harm issues with confinement and everything else. So the sooner the better. I understand that some of these anxiety cases and maybe some of these rescues are not the most suited for crates. We had talked about that last week when we had Haley on the podcast talking about foster dogs and being a foster mom. But it is so, so, so important that your dog accepts confinement when and if it's needed, because I guarantee you it's going to be needed at some point in their life. And if they're not used to it, the time to teach them to get used to it and to become accustomed to it is not when you have a serious medical issue that's presenting itself. Okay, 7th and final deadly sin to dog ownership is not teaching your dog a recall. And I understand that you're not going to have a pristine recall and it's not going to be, absolutely perfect and something that you'd bet $1 million against. Not everyone is going to go to those lengths. You should have some foundational steps of getting your dog to you, even if it's just an emergency. I don't care if your dog is always on leash or you're carrying your dog or something else. If something happens, if some sort of system fails within management and your dog is running out the door, you are going to be very, very happy that you taught Rover, here's the cookies, and whatever that was that you practiced when that dog was young. And then all throughout that dog's life, just to maintain this. I'm talking, at least weekly, if not daily, if it's possible. Just at least one rep, something that's successful, something that the dog knows. Teaching your dog a recall really is something that can save its life, because a dog that does not have a good recall can run out the door, run into the street, running after a squirrel, whatever else, easily hit by a car. They can run away and be lost for days at a time. This is really something that is so near and dear to our hearts. And oftentimes people will call us because their dog's gotten loose 3 to 5 times, and they've just lucked out. It is just pure luck that nothing very serious has happened to the dog. So if you have absolutely positively zero recall, one, you should definitely not be out hiking. Nobody deserves that. That is very poor dog ownership, to be out and letting your dog run amok with absolutely no recall and expecting other people to collect your dog at the beach or on a hiking trail or something else. But you really could be saving your dog's life. So be conscientious of these things, you guys. I know a lot of times as dog owners, we're always trying to do better and what can we do more and how can we help our dogs and how can we make them feel more comfortable? And a lot of times we're beating ourselves up. And this isn't to sit there and beat yourselves up, but all of these things can be deadly to the dog if done to oblivion, if that makes sense. So, things like always letting your dog win. Yeah, if they always win, now they're pulling stuff off the counter, maybe ingesting bones, everything else. Be very conscious of what you are allowing from your dogs. And my 7th and final one is teaching your dog a recall. All right, thanks so much, guys, for putting up with me here this week. My Scotty is at home. He's getting better. He has Tamiflu. I'm taking good care of him. Next week, we are doing 2024 Dog of the Year. We mixed up our schedule a little bit for this winter because of the holidays. You will not want to miss it. I'm so excited to present it. Have a great week, you guys. Enjoy a glass of wine for me. And in the meantime, keep it quirky. Bye, guys.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.